The new CMS 4.1 does not impact either case intake or treasury. So those screens are going to look the same as they have been from the time that you first started using CMS 4.0. But the casework will have a number of changes to it. And what I plan to do, instead of going through the training video, I'll show you where to access the training video. And I suspect most of you have already seen it, but we'll go through the slides that have changed or the screens that have changed, and to refresh you on what these changes are and explain them in a little more detail, and then open it up to Q&A, because it's mainly just to make sure you've got comfort, that you understand the changes, and that you've got support so that you know where to turn if any questions come up afterwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through some of the screenshots before we actually get onto CMS. So let me, first of all, okay, so the first screen you'll see in casework, and that is after the case intake has been performed and the case has been assigned to a Vincentian. When that Vincentian signs on to CMS, this is the screen you'll see. And one thing I'd like to mention, it occurred today. I didn't think anyone was still using the old CMS app that we downloaded several years ago, but apparently some people still are. And when they went to log on this morning, it didn't work. And it won't work. So everybody needs to be using the web browser version of CMS, and that works on a desktop, a laptop, any tablet computer, any pad, iPads. Somebody asked this morning or at noon whether it works on iPhone. It does, but it's not designed for iPhone. The screens are too robust. There's too much information to make it work in iPhone. So while you could log in and see some information, the screens are going to be incomplete, and it's really not set up to use with an iPhone. But you do need to be using a web browser version of CMS, and that is houston.cmssvdp.org. And there'll be no issues. That has been very stable. The only issue we had today is that so many people were looking forward to seeing the new rollout. Everybody tried to log in Georgia, Cincinnati, and Houston this morning at the same time, and it overwhelmed the server for a few minutes, but we got past that and everything is working well. We had one or two small issues that we're working through with Aguilar, but nothing that would impact what you're doing. So with that said, the first screen you'll see will be different. Before, you were able to get the case record form, but you'll notice now they're asking you, when you schedule your visit, to indicate the visit type and the date, and we'll go into that in more detail. Then the next screen, that the main change will deal with assistance. The client screen, the household screen, the situation screen, that is in CMS 4.1 is exactly the same as it was in CMS 4.0. So nothing has changed with that. So the first change you'll see again will be on this initial pre-visit screen. The next change will be on the assistance screen. This will look very similar, where you have check request, pledge request, the gift cards or vouchers or in kind. But the main difference will be, let's say, for example, if you enter a check request, you are now going to see the assistance details and the information about the vendor where the payment is to be made on the same screen. Before, there were multiple screens that you had to go through. The other change you'll see too is that you can verify that the information is correct, and without any further screens, you'll have your check request submitted. And I'll go into that in more detail in a minute. One of the biggest changes you'll see, though, is after you've entered a pledge or a check request, you will see a screen that looks like this, and it will give you a number of options. You can either go back and add more assistance, and that will just take you back to the assistance tab. You can add attachments and follow up, and that will look very much like the old CMS, where you have a screen for attachments, and then you have a screen that'll let you put some follow-up notes. The attachment screen has changed. It lets you add multiple attachments at once, and I'll review that in a few minutes. The follow-up screen is not mandatory. Before you had to put a date and some follow-up notes. You don't have to do that anymore. And it'll end with a closing screen. And the closing screen, the closed case screen, will ask you to put in your hours and your miles. And we're doing this because at the end of the case, you know best the amount of time you've spent on a case. And you can enter your time at that point. Before, we were asking you to enter it early on before you had finished your home visit or finished the work with the particular friend. So this will be a good change for that. And then one thing that you'll see at the top, it's closed case. You now have the ability that if you put in a check request, you can now close the case. It doesn't mean that the check request doesn't go through to the treasurer. The treasurer will still see it and act on it and pay it, but the case will now be closed. Before, you had to wait until the treasurer acted on your assistance request before you could close a case. And the reason this matters is that when you do the monthly conference report, the statistics in the monthly conference report depend on the number of cases that have been closed. If a case is not closed, the monthly conference report does not consider assistance as having been given. So you need to not only have the check paid, but the case has to be closed. This allows the Vincentian to close the case if he's got nothing else that he needs to add to the case, or gives the Vincentian the option to add attachments and add other notes. You'll see on the attachments page, you can add multiple attachments at once. And then once you've put the attachments on, you can upload them at one time. So it just simplifies the attachment screen. And then, as I mentioned, on the closed case screen, it'll at that point ask you to put the minutes and the miles. One other change is if you're a case manager, there's an auto close feature that will show up on your main menu. And you'll notice your main menu has been reorganized a bit, so you'll see them in a bit of a different order than you did before. But at the bottom, for those who are designated as case managers, it'll show auto close. And that means that you'll have the ability to search for all of the cases where you are a case manager. You can either restrict it by different fields, or you can just leave those fields blank and do a search, and it'll give you a list, and it'll tell you how many days the case has been open. It gives you information about the case, and you can choose by checking a box to close that case. This helps because with a number of conferences, before they do their monthly conference report, they want to make sure that all the cases where assistance have been granted are properly closed. Then lastly, we need to mention that you can have information about the entire case process with CMS 4.1 on the council website under the CMS support community. And at the end of this presentation, I'll briefly go there and show you where you can get additional information about the changes and additional help. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share an actual CMS screen and walk through a few of these. Okay. Okay, so the first screen you'll see, again, when the case has been assigned to you, you sign on as a caseworker, is this pre-visit screen. And there's a lot of good information. This one screen is meant to help you prepare for your home visit. So one thing you can do is you go down to this accordion on the bottom, you can click on client, and it pops up, first of all, what was entered by case intake, or you can click record, which is if this is a friend has been assisted before, this is the client record that is retained in CMS. In addition to that, you can see the request details as to what was put in by case intake, as to what the actual request is. You can see if the friend has been helped in the past by going to past assistance. There's also case record notes about the friend. And hold on one second, I think it timed out on me. There we go. Of course, it's going to take a training session for this thing to act up on me, but it's has been very stable. I want to make sure But in any event, remember these accordions on the bottom. So again, you can get client, you get the request detail, you can get a list of past assistants, you can get any client record notes. People ask, well, what are client record notes? If in between helping somebody, you get additional information, you can always do a search under client. And when you click on that particular friend, it lets you add additional notes. It date stamps it and indicates who added the note, but it's just a way of supplementing the information you have available to you. The other good thing is the case record form. And now you'll see that it gives you the option to request it with history. And when you request a case record form with history, it goes into much more detail of showing you all of the past assistants. The reason for this form is many Vincentians like to have a piece of paper to bring with them if it's an in-person home visit, or even if it's a telephone home visit. It's an opportunity for them to have something to make notes on so that when they come back, they can complete the information. So this is what the case record form looks like. It tells you the date the request was made, how many people were in the household, what the basic request is, but it gives you all the information about the friend. And this next page goes into great detail on income and expenses. It's again meant more to be a prompt. We're not expected to gather all of this information. And it goes through all of the past assistance, whether or not it's been food and groceries, whether it's been any other type of assistance. And each case is then laid out in detail where they give you information about the particular case. So it's just something good that if you want to have a piece of paper to work with on your home visit, this is available to you. So again, all of this is on this pre-visit screen. The main thing you're going to have to add, and the only thing you'll see a red asterisk by, is the type of visit. So you set up the home visit. Let's say that you've agreed to meet in the food pantry. It'll be a in-person visit, but it won't be in their home. You can put the date, and if the date's going to take place at some date in the future, you can just choose whatever date the home visit is going to take place. And once that's done, you'll click next, and these next screens will be the same screens that you saw in CMS 4.0. It'll go through and check to see if there's any additional request or information about the client. It'll give you opportunities to update the household information. It'll ask you to write in more detail what the situation is with that particular friend. And then you'll get to the assistance tab that will now be the next change that you'll see in CMS 4.1. So I'm going to jump to that screen right now. So in this particular case, let's say that there's a check request. He's asked for rental assistance. And as you would in the prior version of CMS, you indicate that it's housing and rent and that he's seeking rent. You put the account holder's name, which is always for rental assistance, the name of the friend. It's actually on all types of assistance, the name of the friend. Sometimes the name appears differently on a utility bill, but again, you need to enter, as you would in the prior version of CMS, the amount that you're going to assist with, the account number, which for rent is typically the apartment number. And again, this information is used by the treasurer to put in the memo line so that the payment gets credited properly. Now you'll notice that before you had to, after you enter this, go to another screen to put vendor information. Now it's consolidated into one screen. So you put the vendor category, which in this case is housing, and you've got the same options that you did before. If you can check on the drop down, and if they have the apartment, you can select it, and that's all you need to do. If they're not there, you can check this box and enter the new vendor information, and your CMS administrator can add it to your vendor drop-down list later in the month. Now, another change is that you'll see the check boxes. Before, you had to go back and verify information at a later time on a different screen. Now, all on the same screen, if you are confident that this is the right information, you can check this box to indicate that it's been checked and it's all correct. The same thing with the vendor. Before, once you completed this information, you would then go to the attachment screen, and after that, you would go to a checks pledges screen, and it would tell you that the request was pending or had been submitted. In this case, now that all of this information is consolidated on one screen, you hit submit, it will take you back to your assistance tab, and you'll now see that the actual check request has been submitted. And it gives you the opportunity now to add additional assistance if that's warranted. Now, in this case, you'll notice before you used to have a tab that said attachments, it said checks pledges, it had complete. Well, now these tabs depend on an option that you're given. And when you click next, you'll see what that option is. This is probably the biggest change you'll see in CMS 4.1. So now you've got several options to choose from. If you add more assistance, it just takes you back to the assistance screen. The attachments and follow-up are very similar to what you have in the current version or in CMS 4.0, where you were able to add attachments, but as I showed you, you can now add multiple attachments, and you can do follow-up before you close the case. You can choose just follow-up only with no attachments, and then have the option to close the case. You can do the attachment only and have the option to close the case. Or now, if there's a check request and you don't intend to have any further interaction with the friend, you can actually close the case. And what this means is that the treasurer will still see the check request. The case will still populate with the check information once the treasurer enters it, but nobody has to go back and close this case. For purposes of the monthly conference report, the assistance has been granted and the case has been closed. So if I select this first option, this close case option, it now goes to this very last tab that says close case. And at this time, you know how much time you have spent in assisting this friend. Then you can put in the minutes, and then you can put in the miles. If you have chosen one where you were going to add an attachment, let me go back and I'll show you what that looks like. Anytime you go back to the assistance from the closed case screen, it'll now provide you these attachments and follow-up tab, or you could have selected those. So in this particular case, when we go to the attachment screen, it gives you the opportunity now to attach 3 different files. The only thing you need to do is give it a unique name. Some people like to put the friend's name. It's not necessary because this is the friend's case file. So usually you should just put lease, or you should put pledge document, or you can come up with whatever name, utility bill, but you can now do this for 3 different documents on the same screen and then hit upload. The next thing you can do is on follow-up. Before in CMS, you had to put a follow-up date. There was a red asterisk here. Now you can put it and put whatever information you want, and then you can proceed to the closed case screen. And again, at this point, it's going to ask you to put the miles and the minutes. So let's say that you spent 60 minutes and there was no mileage involved, that they came to the pantry. And at that point, you can close the case. It'll prompt you to ask you to make sure you want to do this. And you say yes. And at this point, the case is closed. Now, somebody said, well, what happens if somebody comes back later and you do additional work with them? You know, how do you record your time? Well, like you could in the prior version, you can always reopen a case at any point in time. And you can, in this case, if you need to update your minutes, you know, you can put additional time that you spent and save that. You can go back and add additional follow-up if you want to add a new follow-up date and additional notes for your follow-up. You can go back if you need to and add additional assistance by just hitting restart, and it'll let you now add another check request, pledge request, or what have you. But once you've done all of that and you want to close your reopened case, it's just like the other CMS. You just progress to the final tab, and go through and make sure your hours are up to date, and then you select close. One thing I'd like to mention on the close case feature, the one that lets you close it immediately, if you have a pledge, you don't want to close a case. The pledge by its nature indicates that you've pledged some money, and that if the friend fulfills the pledge conditions, you will then issue a check. If you have a pledge and only a pledge and you close the case, it will withdraw that pledge and close the case, and you would have to re-enter the assistance. So the feature where you go directly to the closed case screen would be best for check request. For pledges, you should either select attachments, and oftentimes you can attach the pledge, or you can attach the lease agreement, or you can select that you want to do follow-up case notes, or you can just simply leave the screen where the assistant shows that the check request has been submitted. You don't need to do anything else, and you can go back to the home screen and work on another case. The only other change I want to show you is this auto close. And again, I mentioned that during the overview, and that is, it just gives you the ability to search. So you don't have to put anything in the field. If you just hit search, it'll give you all the cases where you're the manager, and it'll show you information about the case and how many days it's been open. And if you decide you want to close it, you just check the box and say close selected case. The last thing I want to mention to you before we open it to Q&A is that if you go to the website for the council at svdphouston.org, and you go under Vincentian and you go to CMS support community, it'll give you a few things. First of all, one of the videos that we shared with you earlier was an introductory video where Huey put together a number of screenshots explaining the changes in CMS 4.1. That video is right here where it says new enhancements. Then you can go down to the training videos, and you'll see that this entering casework, this has now been updated. And that was the other link we sent you, was the updated detailed version of entering casework. And in this video, I go through every screen and explain what takes place on every screen. So that gives you the information that you would need to either refresh yourself or to help others in your conference. So with that said, I'm going to go back and stop the screen sharing and give everyone an opportunity to ask some questions. Let me go through some of the ones that came through on the chat. So Mark says it sounds like it will work on a Windows or iOS laptop device. That's correct. It'll work on any of the Apple or the Windows or the Google Chrome. Any web browser will support CMS. But again, on your iPhone, the screens are too small to really properly handle it, and they won't be displayed properly. So it's best to use it on a desktop, a laptop, a pad, or tablet computer. What is a pledge request? As a home visitor, I am making a pledge. So the pledge request is one where many of the conferences in the Archdiocese has a form that says that they will pay a certain amount of money if the friend is able to come up with the balance within 30 days. Most of the pledges don't stay open more than 2 weeks to 30 days. Some can do it longer. It's entirely up to the conference. But the pledge is then entered into CMS, just like a check request, where you put the friend's name and you put the amount that's been pledged. And that pledge will stay in CMS until the friend calls back and says, I've collected the remainder of my rent, or you somehow verify that with the leasing office. At that point, just like you could in the prior CMS, you can open that pledge and with checking a few boxes to verify the information, convert it into a check request. Why do we care about the amount of time? All of the information that you enter into CMS rolls into a monthly conference report that's filed with the council. And Huey, as the resource analyst at the council, is able to compile all of that information by district or by council, and quite frankly, use it in applying for grants or in reporting. So you want to have your time reported because it's something that the council cares about, and knowing how much time we have spent directly helping our friends. Now, there's other time that can be reported. Somebody said, well, what if I'm involved in case administration or some other type of work, but it's not directly involved with a particular case? Let me go back and show you. I know some of you may not already know this, but if you go back to the home screen, you have an area where it says add volunteer task. And it will always show you what you've done in connection with a case visit. It'll show you the case number and number of people helped and what time was entered in that case record. But sometimes you're getting involved with case administration that's not associated with a particular case. So you can add that, or you can add other types of volunteer time. So you can, for example, we spent a lot of time putting together a Adopt a Family Christmas program, and we recorded our time there. Or some conferences deliver checks, so the person delivering the check can put the delivery time in. The helpline workers can put their time in if it's not something that's going to show up in a particular case. Meetings, any of this volunteer time. And it doesn't matter who enters it, because it all rolls up in a summary format in the monthly conference report. And again, and then Huey can roll it up into a district report or into a council report. So that's an opportunity for you to add time. But yeah, to answer your question, the council very much depends on that. We just recently got a grant in Fort Bend County by being able to show the number of people we helped and the amount of time we spent helping them and the amount of assistance we provided. And all of that was accessed through CMS. The next question says, let's see. It says, is there any way to edit an attachment? Often we get a client who has a PDF of his lease with 40 pages. We only want 1 or 2 pages. Can we delete all of that stuff? What I often do is, once I have it on my computer, if you open it up in Adobe or any of the readers, many of them allow you to just delete the pages you don't want or save the page you want. What we've been telling our friends is just send us 1 page, but yes, you can edit the document and then upload it into CMS. And if somebody has uploaded a longer document, you can always delete that document and upload a shorter one. But you can always go back and change those attachments. But as far as editing the attachment itself, it's done outside of CMS in a separate program. It says on the pre-visit screen, how do you tell that you are the assigned visitor? Well, first of all, it will not go to that screen unless you are assigned to it. But let me go back to the screen itself. So on you'll see, first of all, your assigned cases. And on the pre-visit screen, you would not be allowed to enter the information if you were not assigned. But one way you can see who is assigned, or you can reassign it to somebody, is on this pre-visit screen. You go up to options. And when you open that up, it's going to show you the case manager, who the case worker, and who the secondary, if any. And you can do your drop down for your conference. Again, this is a training site, but you can reassign as a primary case worker to someone else. You can put yourself as a secondary and not the primary. You can select whoever is appropriate for case manager and hit reassign. But to answer your question, the way you can see who is assigned to a particular case is using that options tab on the top. The next question we had was, now, and they said, they're not currently using CMS. That brings up a good point. Our goal is to have all conferences on CMS by the end of 2023. And that's for a very important reason. We're finding a number of the grants are requiring that the cases be tracked on CMS, and the council will not pass through grant money unless a conference is on CMS. So that's going to be one big incentive for the conferences to get on CMS. The other is that the way we get the grants, or the way that we file our reports, whether it's with the food banks or with different organizations or the IRS, we need to gather information. And that's what Huey does. Huey is able to mine all of the data that is in CMS and put together reports. And those reports are very useful to the council. So the council will be asking that all conferences get on CMS by the end of the year. So it's good that you're seeing this change now. And we will be contacting you, or you can be contacting us. And I'll show you in a minute. In fact, actually, I'll show you right now how you can get support. If you run into a question and you want additional information, you can always send an email to this Ask CMS committee at svdphouston.org. It's monitored by Huey and by me, and we have a user support group, and that's going to continue to grow. But we have had Vincentians from different conferences who are experienced CMS users who enjoy using CMS and who are willing to learn all the new features. They've agreed to help other conferences and other Vincentians. So we have a number of folks that can help you with any question that you have, or can help set you up. If your conference is ready to start CMS, just contact us, and we'll go through the steps of getting everybody trained, and then getting all your information put into CMS. Right now, almost 60% of the conferences are on CMS. Okay, the next question we have, it says, what type of attachments are allowed, both PDF and JPEG? I believe Word documents will show up also. So the last I checked, it was Word, PDF, or JPEG. So you can do either, if you take a picture with your phone, that can be uploaded into CMS if you have a PDF document, or if you have a Word document. They said in December, several of our check requests didn't show on our treasurer's dashboard. We found request and unprocessed request. That's a treasurer issue where each day the treasurer checks, oftentimes more than once a day, to see check requests that are in CMS. And at that point, acts on the check request by writing the check and noting it in CMS. So all I can say is that's a process issue that's got to be worked out with the treasurer to make sure that those check requests are properly processed. And then, so what if a friend's name is in it incorrectly? They call again for assistance. Is CMS able to match the name? Yes, what we find out and what we ask people to do, we've been asking to try to get birth date and get phone numbers. We're finding that most friends bring their phones with them, and most friends are more than happy to give you their birth date. And when you do that, it will then bring up different variations of that spelling of that friend's name. But if it turns out that somebody has entered that friend in two different ways, there's a merge feature within CMS that lets you request that a friend be merged. And without getting too deeply into the weeds on that, let me just show you real quickly. If you go to search and you go to clients, and clients is everybody within the Archdiocese. So if a friend has been helped by any conference in the Archdiocese, the name and the record will show up in a client search. When you do a case search, it's strictly the help provided by your particular conference. So let's say that we do a client search, and and we find out that there's 2 James tests. And you can look real quickly and say, okay, wait, these are different birth dates, these are different people. You can always open it up and it'll show you their current address and past assistance they've gotten, and their notes that can be added. Certain functions within CMS, and I believe it's the CMS administrator, can actually change the name, can edit. For example, you see this edit button. It's not available to all Vincentians, and I'll have to get back to you to figure out which functions can do that. But the other way to do it too is if you see 2 records with the exact same person, you can do a merge request, and that essentially requests that the 2 records be merged into one so that the correct record will show. But talk to your CMS administrator, because your CMS administrator can either make the change or work with the user support group or me or Huey in making that change or merging the cases. And again, I'm doing this in a very brief way because I don't want to get too far into the weeds. It's getting away from the purpose of this particular session, but you can follow up with us at that Ask CMS Committee email address. Okay, that's all of the questions that were on the chat. So now I'm going to open the floor up to anybody that has particular questions about anything we've discussed. And again, the training video will go in much more detail and should answer most of your questions. And if you have questions after you've worked with it a while, you can send us an email. Okay, well, we appreciate everybody's attention. We ended up having over 20 participants tonight, and we had a large number earlier today. And we've gotten good feedback already. Most people feel that these changes are intuitive. So again, we're here to help. If there's any questions that come up, just send them our way and we'll take care of them. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Wynn.